righty, welcome to the Quest for Excellence podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Montreal. I'm joined today by Michelle Ramos. Incredibly excited to have you here today, Michelle. And just a little bit about you. You are a professional barber, stylist, and makeup artist. You also run a nonprofit called Don't Raise Statistics. You're also a loving and loyal mother to your young daughter. And I got to say, guys, without question, Michelle has one of the most incredible life stories of perseverance and complete unwillingness to play the victim role, which is something that so many people do. And she just decided not to give up on life. So I'm super excited to have you here. I know this conversation is going to be incredibly valuable for anybody who listens to this. So Michelle, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We just talked for damn near 45 minutes before this and got to know each other a little bit, and we've had some time to talk over the past week. And I'd already consider you a friend. You're a very open person. I'm the same way. I just gravitate towards people like that. So this should be great based on that fact. And I want to dive right in because there's so much to talk about. You've had such a rich life with ups and downs and having to get through some pretty intense shit. So again, I know a little bit about your life. You recorded a video a couple years ago for school you were at for your barber school. That's kind of how I found you, through a friend of a friend. You had come across my podcast through him. I contacted you per his suggestion, and here we are.
I know, networking at its finest.
Oh, it was crazy. It was such a micro of this, and it happened so quickly. It was within 24 hours we were already connected. And
I'm a true believer that things happen for a reason. Yeah. I feel like our paths were supposed to cross.
Yep. And I think that's true either way, like negative or positive. And I think we're both in a good mindset right now. And we were meant to find each other, to help each other, and also to help other people. Sometimes things happen for the wrong reason, but it was supposed to happen, right?
Right.
Anyway, so let's dive right in. I know a little bit about your life based on your video, but there are some details that I'd like to hear if you're willing. And the first thing you described, and I guess go ahead and talk about, before we even go into what happened when you were 8 and you being stabbed and all that. Go before that, because I know nothing about you, where you were born, what city you were born in. I know about your brothers and sisters, but if you want to talk about your super early life up until that point when you were 8, just whatever you want to discuss about that.
The crazy part about that question, though, is that actually because of that tragic incident when I was 8 years old, it did childhood PTSD. So I really don't have a lot of memory for the stabbing. But I was born in Sarasota, Florida.
Okay.
I do know my family moved us to Ohio when I was 4 going on 5, kind of like the beginning of elementary years.
Okay.
And it's going to jump ahead in this brilliant format you got here, but my brain surgeries, the very first one ultimately gave me epilepsy. So having PTSD, memories blocked out so early in life from the accident, and then the epilepsies, and the seizures, it was a complete memory mess up. So sometimes I'll get flashbacks. I remember I had this memory when I had to ask my family. I said, I keep having this memory or flashback. I can't remember. It's a cul-de-sac road, and there's a line of kids and a motorcycle and going in circles, and my mom was just kind of looking at me are you serious? She was so when you was 3 years old, when your dad would get off of work, we lived on a cul-de-sac, and you would stand there, and once he would pull up, all the kids, he would drive them, little laps around the cul-de-sac. And that is a memory, obviously, from early childhood, but that is a memory that I just recently had.
Interesting. Wow. That's fascinating. I'd like to talk a bit more about that, whatever you're willing to talk about. But, I guess then up until, because I know nothing about it, and, you can talk about as much of it that you're comfortable with the stabbing. What exactly happened? What was it? An accident?
We was in the neighborhood playing, and this was back in early 90s. So I don't know if you probably remember, we're probably good age wise. When Power Wheels first came out with that battery operated car. Like, it was a red Corvette, and it was the most basic that a Power Wheel could be. Like, it was like one drive bar down to the tires, left, right, and a gas pedal and a battery, most basic. We lived in a really low income neighborhood. So this was a used Power Wheel. It had a ringer, It was not brand new out the box. And the crankshaft drive thing, like this big long metal pole that goes from the steering wheel. This is all inside, under the red Corvette cover. So there's a long metal pipe, like it goes down from the steering wheel, and then it connects to another long pipe. And when you turn, that's how, you could turn the car. Well, that drive crankshaft thing busted through the steering wheel. I was turned around, like my butt was on the steering wheel. We were turning around doing a picture. I don't know what we were doing, but it busted through the steering wheel, and it went up into me through the butt, and then up and through to me towards the front.
Oh, wow. Jesus.
So, yeah.
And do you remember that? Do you remember when that happened, the pain and all that? Was it that vivid? Is that why the PTSD hit in? Because that was such
actually, my oldest sister, me and her, a couple of years ago, we actually just had this conversation. Like, I wanted to know the details, I guess, because I was so bothered that I couldn't remember anything. And she had made a comment, and I had looked at her like, what are you talking about? She's like, you really didn't know I was standing next to you? Like, no, I don't remember nothing. And apparently it happened. And she's oh my goodness, she's like almost 10 years older than me. So, she's like 18 years old, and she watched it happen. She got me pulled up off the car and walked me home. And I do remember telling my mama I was bleeding, but she had started her menstrual. So when she heard it, she was like, go to the bathroom. Like, we really got to go talk. And apparently that's when somebody like brought her the bloody crankshaft thing, and she put two and two together. And she put me in a car and drove me to Children's Hospital, because she said she would get me to the hospital before ambulance would get to the house.
Yeah.
So that was
unreal.
Yeah.
And you spent that's talking. And the one thing that kept popping in my head, like you had nothing to do with this. Talk about a random, completely, I initially thought that you got stabbed by like a family member or some kid, or it was like an accident, but talk about the most random shit possible.
Oh yeah.
It's just crazy. I've never even really heard of anything like that with that exact circumstance.
Right. So when I think back to my childhood, I mean, obviously, like, I'm older, so little memories come back, but like for the longest time, like, I mean, a good solid decade of my life, trying to think of like a childhood memories and things. The very first memory that I truly have is waking up tied to a bed, like my hands were in restraints, bed at Children's Hospital, and I had a shit bag. Like, I don't even know if I can say that word. I'm sorry. But
you can say the shit.
I had whatever you want. Okay,
it's fine.
Like
the clossy bag, yeah.
My very first memory is 8 years old, and I got a stoma with a bag around it, and I can look down and I can watch myself have a bowel movement.
Oh God. Wow. And that, I laugh about that now. I don't mean.
Oh no, I can laugh about it now. Trust me.
Yeah, but when you're a kid, that can't be fun. That can't be okay.
I think that's
really
like
shock you.
The way it's been explained to me over the years is like that tragic incident is why like my memories are messed up.
Mm-hmm. Going through, and I don't really mean adult things, but that's really intense. Even when kids going through cancer treatment, it changes you. And we'll talk about this later on, how you matured a lot quicker than other kids and how that affected your school life.
Yes.
Well, I want to hear more about that. But so, all right. So that happened. I know from your video, a few months later, you can get rid of the doo-doo bag. You didn't have to have that anymore.
Yes.
So things were starting to kind of get back to normal. And then another thing happened, which I had no details about, but when you were 12, you broke your hip. And this, I do know, this singular thing, however it happened, which we'll talk about here, but this singular thing probably had the most impact on the next, 10, 15, 20 years of your life.
Oh my God.
So go ahead. What happened? How'd you break your hip?
Another freak of nature, I guess.
Oh my Lord.
So,
Go ahead.
and it's growing up. It was we played softball. We would be outside playing, and I was getting these Charlie horses. And if you've ever had a Charlie horse, they're excruciating. Like, so I was
Sucked. Horrible.
doing teenage 12-year-old life, you know, and these Charlie horses were so bad, and we thought it was like, you know, growing pains or this, you know. We've had doctors say, eat some more bananas, get some more potassium. You got. So these Charlie horses literally went on for about 9 and blood curdling screams. Now, in your mind, picture this: like if you're standing up and you look down at your feet, your toes are pointing forward, your heels are behind your body, and that's how it is. Well, over 9 months of Charlie horses, my left foot, the toes were actually where the heel was, and the heel was basically almost where the toes would be pointing. So my left leg had made an almost full turn radius.
Wow.
So after 9 months of it, like, we had this one Charlie horse that was just so excruciating. My dad said, no more, like, let's go to the hospital. He took me to the ER, and he was asked, he's like, well, where's the x-rays? Like, because he explained to this doctor, like, we've been doing this, you know, this has been 9 months. Like, this can't be a vitamin, you know, something's wrong. Well, the doctor asked my dad, he's like, well, who can I call for the x-rays? My dad's like, ain't nobody ever done no x-rays. What are you talking about? So they did x-rays, and come to find out, my left hip was almost 9.5 inches out of socket.
Wow.
And the Charlie horses was because how I said my toes was where my heel was. As it slipped out of the socket and the leg was turning, all those Charlie horses was the muscles coming off the bone as the leg would turn more out.
Oof.
So
that just sounds beyond painful.
It was excruciating. They called it a slip epiphysis. It's common in females in puberty, where the growth plate will crumble. It allows the hip to slide out of socket. So they fixed it, and I was in a hospital bed for that whole year, in a wheelchair, like couldn't walk. And they did an x-ray to see where we was at in the, you know, the growth plate that they put in, you know, that one crumbled and the hip slipped out of socket again. At 13, we had to have another hip surgery where they put in a bracket and screws. And then that meant I had to lay in that hospital bed and be in the wheelchair and not walk for another like 15 months, because the growth plate can grow back in on its own, but you just have to like give it that time. The screws and the bracket in the hip, it allowed it to grow back in. So when I was 15, they was able to like go in and pull out the bracket and the screws. So it fixed itself, so to say. But if you fast forward, you know, 10, 15 years, when you spend that much time in a hospital bed or a wheelchair, and then you have parents that love you and they try to make a bad situation better the best way they know how, you tend to gain a lot of weight when they feel bad, and you get a Happy Meal for this, and then you get So through that time, like, I definitely gained so much weight that by the time I got to like my 20s, I was 420 pounds. Wow. 420 pounds on a damaged hip socket. It's not good. So ultimately, the arthritis had formed and my hip had like fused itself together. So it was excruciating pain.
And you spent, to back up just a tiny bit, you spent, I think I heard this correctly in the video, you spent 3 years
just over
immobile, where you couldn't walk?
3.5 years in a hospital bed wheelchair, and then physical therapy and beginning to walk again. Yeah.
That alone, I mean, anybody hearing this, to be a young kid, not being able to walk, and like you said, you did have some of the make you feel better things going on, the McDonald's, the, you know, being able to eat whatever you wanted, and you know, getting showered with love and affection. That all feels good, but to be stuck for 3 years as a young teen, that alone, the fact that you're here talking to me right now and you're a badass woman and you're a great mother and all that, that says a lot about you. So that's crazy. That would have turned a lot of people from, I cannot ever get out of this. I'm going to be overweight the rest of my life. I'm going to be living with my parents. I'm never going to have kids. I'm never going to have a partner. This is just going to be who I am. And this is what I mean about you not choosing the victim role. You easily could have, like, that was the point right there where it could have set in for the rest of your life, but it didn't. And so this next part of your life is interesting. I dealt with some similar stuff, being more mature than most people, but also having some big time emotional issues and not having a filter and, trying to fit in and all that kind of stuff. So you went, and to kind of set the stage here, kind of how you described it in your video, but being out of the social environment when you're a young kid, it's tough enough when you're growing up in it, but being out of it and then being thrust back into it when you were, how old did you go back to traditional school? What age were you?
I got to start 6th grade and I was in middle school for 2 months maybe when we found it was truly broke. And then I got put back into school about maybe 3 months into freshman year. They put me back into a public school.
Okay, so right there, that's being in high school alone. I'm guessing you didn't really know anybody at the school. You didn't have friends that were there, huh?
A couple of girls I grew up playing softball with, and like where I lived was a dead-end street. There was literally like 6 houses on this dead-end street. So I knew the kids that, I grew up with, but
gotcha.
Didn't really know people because.
Yeah. Well, at least, I wasn't expecting that, but at least you knew a couple people. That probably helped, at least in some ways. But the way you described it, having to deal with, because you grew up so fast, you had to. You were a teenager and you dealt with more stuff than most people do in their entire lives, when it comes to hardships and having to get through stuff and surgeries and all that. Like, that's more than I've spent time in the hospital. It's wild. So you get to school, you're in this kind of mature mindset. You're not used to the adolescent kind of vibe and kids joking around and being silly or starting to experiment with new things and maybe rebel a bit. So talk about maybe the first little bit, and then how you ended up getting into the wrong crowd, doing some drugs and all that. How did that morph into struggling to fit into getting with that group of people?
It's basically exactly what you said. It was struggling to fit in, like find my place, because like when you're in elementary school, you're these little cute innocent babies, and then when you get to middle school, it's kind of like, like for, boys and girls, we hit puberty and our bodies begin transforming and, so it's like a whole new stage of life. And then when you get to high school, it's like you're these little adults and it like mold you. Well, that middle part, where it's like how you would like kind of form your identity. I was around nothing but grown-ups. and it was never a situation of a sugarcoat. So for me, it's, I've always had hard truths and brutal realities, and this is what it is, and this is what we've got to do to fix it, and that's it. So going into high school and then being around these people that didn't have those hard truths, like, and then, you weigh 420 pounds, it was hard.
I'm literally in the mindset that you were when you're in the school, when I'm feeling those emotions. There's going to be a little bit of envy. There's going to be a little bit of
there's jealousy and
mistrust,
and
bitterness, the anger, because it's tough, and it's not like none of this was really your fault. And that's also why it makes it more difficult. But in many ways, you were kind of beyond a lot of these people. But that wasn't recognized by anyone.
Well, it got recognized in the sense of from when I did get to go in 9th grade, my mid-10th grade year, I had been kicked out of one high school, sent to another, got kicked out of that high school, sent back to the first one, kicked out of high school, and sent to an alternative high school.
And was that the
Yes.
Saturn school, right? Awesome. And from what I remember, you graduated pretty quick. It sounds like you really liked
Well,
being there. I remember seeing that
it
picture
wasn't
of
so
you
much
there.
that I
And
liked
you
being
had a big,
there, to be honest with you.
yeah.
Their concept for the program was genius, but it was
Mhm.
fresh and new back then. So it was really this like kind of crappy old building kind of in the back of Summit Lake. And it was kind of like where they sent the quote unquote problem kids. So the
Gotcha.
program was genius, and I'm thankful that I got to be a part of it in the beginning of it while they was building and
Mhm.
you know, finding a way to make it work, because ultimately it got moved, you know, to one of the other high schools, and it's a much larger program. I don't even think it's called Saturn anymore.
Oh, no.
I think what set me up for success with Saturn was the 3 years of homeschooling. Saturn was basically like homeschooling, except I had to get up and go there. But it was, here's your work. This is what you got to learn. Work at your own pace. And I had for 3 years.
Nice.
So for me, it was like I could blow through it because I was already disciplined to just get in a book and do the work and be done with it.
Well, this is almost a blessing then, because you couldn't have done this in traditional high school. You would have been stuck miserable through when you were 18, right? Because you graduated when you were 16, right? From Saturn. That's freaking awesome. Like, again, you could have played the victim and just been miserable and hung out with the wrong people, done the wrong shit. And I know it wasn't like you were perfect after this point. You got in some trouble, whatever. But and it wasn't like it was your decision, but you took what life gave you and made the best out of it. Simple as that. Yeah. I love it. It's fucking amazing. So, all right. So from there, you know, you were already, I'm assuming during that time, you might've been hanging around with some of the wrong people as well. And then after that, when you graduated, you know, you moved when you were 18, you were emancipated, you started being grown, right?
I was 16. I moved out when I was 16. But yes.
And you started living, you know, an adult life right then. You just hit the ground running immediately. And with that comes, you know, maybe meeting the wrong people, finding the wrong ways to feel better about yourself through the wrong relationships or narcotics, whatever. So you want to talk about that phase as much as you want to. You don't have to go too in depth.
No, seriously, it was, you know, like once you get to a point when you're dead inside, it's like you can have this vessel of a body and you could be walking around, but inside you could still be dead. So it was, you know, I got 2 jobs. So obviously I got rent to pay now, but there was a lot of avoidance in the sense of like trying to fill these missing things. And for me, it wasn't even, they were things that I didn't know about. Like I had been sheltered, I had been, you know, taken care of medically, like all, you know, I basically was put in a bubble, and then I got out into the world, and it was a harsh reality to how cruel people could be. And then when you get that line of coke, or, you know, I read something the other day that about, oh my gosh, I want to find it just to be absolutely right. But it's like being addicted to the drug. It's being addicted to making the hurt and the loneliness and not exist.
Exactly. That's a couple of weeks ago, this came up in my life too. And it doesn't matter what you're addicted to, cigarettes, sex, weed, coke, it doesn't matter. The addiction can be as strong with any of them. It could be chocolate. And it doesn't have to be a tier 1 narcotic. So that's super powerful. And people don't realize that. A lot of people don't. But I get it. I get what you were going through. It's the same kind of idea of just trying to fit in and have some semblance of normalcy, even if it is doing, you know, dumb shit, like
and
coke
for me,
and drugs,
it was just, I wanted to feel like I belonged somewhere. Like I had, I didn't belong in school. I didn't belong at home. I didn't, you know, I felt I didn't belong anywhere.
If I can give you a little, and I don't really like to talk about my life too much at all. I mean, this is all about you. But when I was in high school, just a little bit, when I was 10, I moved from New Orleans to Detroit, where my mom's family was. Had a few years of like growing pains, but had some friends, whatever. But getting into high school, that all kind of changed. First couple of years, where it was basically an environment where if you didn't have money to throw in on the bag or the beer, you weren't going out with your quote unquote
Yes.
friends that night. It was that kind of environment. So I totally understand, and no judgment at all. I get that feeling of I'll do whatever I need to do to not
Yes.
feel alone. It's that simple. That's like one of the most basic primal urges of humans. So let's keep going. So I don't care about what you were doing. I know what you were doing and why you were doing it. So keep going. Talk about when you started to see little black spots in your vision.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So what had happened was I had moved to Florida when I was 19. Spent a few years down there. I didn't go back to Sarasota. I went to North Florida. And I don't know what brought me back to Ohio, but you see them little stickers in people's cars all the time say stuck in Ohio. That's how I feel. Like Ohio is home, it's not where I was born, but it's home. So I came back to Ohio, and got another place. I was working a lot of jobs. I was staying high, doing what I knew to do to survive. And so I started getting these headaches. And I really thought I just, needed some glasses. So obviously I put it on the back burner. It's hard to make appointments when you're working basically 2 full-time jobs. So once we did that, I finally made the eye doctor appointment when the little black dots started becoming almost like a fog in my eye. So I'm in this eye doctor place and they dilate my eyes and they look in them. And then this lady just I could tell on her face, it was a look of, I don't know. It was one of those feelings that you get that something's not okay, but you don't know what, So I am sitting there and she leaves and then she walks back in with 2-3 other doctors. They're all just looking in my eyes and looking at each other, and I see them writing notes and I'm like, okay, listen, I need something. What is going on here? What's
freaking
going
me
on?
out here.
How many do I need glasses? And they're like, yeah, no, you need to go to the hospital. We don't want to worry you. We're not going to alarm you. We're just going to give you a letter. It'll be an envelope. Just take it to the doctor. And once the ER doctor comes in, just give them the letter and they'll know exactly what to do. They got it. So I'm definitely worried. And they had told me have somebody meet me there because I went to the eye doctors alone. They was make sure somebody meets you at the hospital. So I called my mom and her and my dad are on their way to the hospital and I'm on my way to the hospital. We get there and we give him this letter and the doctor comes in and he's just we need to do a spinal tap right away. And I'm just looking at them excuse me? What the hell is a spinal tap? And they definitely explained it and we did it. And they said that when they put the needle into your spine, fluid is going to come out in this little action thing that was sticking out of my back. You got to lay so still. You can't move. It's painful. It is not nice.
Oh God, yeah.
So they said that the pressures, they want them to measure an 11, and that tells them how much fluid's on the brain, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm sitting here brain, what are y'all talking about? I just needed some glasses. The opening pressures the first time were almost 60. We was at a 58, and they pulled so much fluid off. And then come to find out, they said it's this illness. It's called pseudotumor cerebri, and it's where your brain believes that it has a brain tumor. It's a pseudotumor is a false brain tumor, false tumor. So the brain was swelling because it thinks that there's this brain tumor in it. So the brain is swelling and the body's trying to protect itself. When your brain swells, your optical nerves, they swell as well. But the catcher part is that when your optical nerves swell to a certain degree, the only thing that's left to happen is the nerve endings begin to die. So the black dots and actually before the black dots came, now that I'm thinking about it, were excruciating migraines. I would lock myself in the basement of a house where absolutely no light, no sound. It was cool. Light would hurt physically. Sound would hurt physically, to where I would be vomiting and crying and just wanting my head to go away. So,
wow.
the black dots was actually like my body trying to say, hey, something ain't right. I waited.
Yeah, this ain't just migraines, bro. You gotta go. Yeah.
So they relieved that pressure and they got off a whole bunch of the fluid, and they said, this should be the fix. Well, 20 spinal taps into it, because the headaches would keep coming, the floaters would get worse. That's when they said, okay, we need to put in a brain shunt, because obviously, like, the one spinal tap didn't fix it. Like, your brain is swelling, and we need to give the body a way to get the fluid off when it does raise. So that's where brain surgery came in, and they put in the first brain shunt.
And this was after you had I think I'm trying to get this part of the timeline correct. You had already had 20 spinal taps up to this point, or were you having these as you were?
No, we had about 20 spinal taps and blood patches, because sometimes when they do a spinal tap, if something can happen to where the needle, where they put the needle into your spine and then they pull it out, generally and usually, like, a little blood clot forms in that pinhole and it seals it.
Mm-hmm.
But in the instance that it doesn't get sealed, you get sick. You get super sick, because there's now a pinhole link in your spinal cord, and as that blood drips off onto the spinal cord, it makes you sick. So what they do is they put the needle back. They use an x-ray machine and they put the needle back into the exact hole where they did the spinal tap, and then they draw blood out of your arm and they inject it into your spine, called a blood and it's to force a clot to make you stop getting sick. So it was like spinal taps, and there was a couple times we had the blood patches, to seal the spinal tap hole. But after there was like so many of those, that's when we opted for the brain shunt.
Because you were just kind of putting a little band-aid on the problem.
That's exactly how they said it too.
Got it. Yep. Yeah. And how many brain surgeries did you have? Was it 3?
We had from 2010 to 2014. There's been 11. The initial install of the brain shunt, obviously, and then things happen. Like, I was 400 plus pounds. Like, one time the dog jumped on my stomach and it pulled the tube out of the abdomen, and then it like started going back up in the neck. One of the brain shunts, it just stopped working and I was getting sick. Like, so they literally took it out of where it was in the skull and they replaced it into a different area of the skull, and it seemed to work good. And then we've been doing pretty good since then. I got pregnant, and
yeah, I was just going to say, right in the middle of this, you got pregnant in 2012, right? Insane. And let me ask you about that. Because I could sit here and listen to an hour of you talking about all the medical stuff. It's freaking fascinating. I'm like blown away. I didn't know about a lot of this stuff. It's great, but both in essence of time and for both of us in the audience, this part too. I really want to ask you about this. You got pregnant in 2012, right? You were still incredibly overweight at this point, from what you told me. I think I remember seeing a picture of you when you were pregnant. You had a big old belly. That dude was. He was big. Yeah, no offense, nothing like that. I don't care. You're a beautiful person. Yeah, you were pretty big. And this is the part I want to ask you about, because I'm curious how you answer this. It's going to kind of solidify how I think you've dealt with all of this. I think, but you got sober when
the day I took the pregnancy test. I was wrung out.
Yep. and this is going to. I know it was difficult. That goes without saying. No one is like, yeah, I get to be off drugs tomorrow, and yeah, I feel great. No, I understand it was tough. But if you can talk about, this is where people struggle. They don't have a why. They don't have a reason why they do things. So your reason was your daughter, and she wasn't even there yet. But how difficult was that to put? Because really, you were putting this was a pivotal point in your entire life. You were putting the old you behind the old ways of coping with things, being selfish by doing drugs, which really wasn't helping you at all. It was hurting your health. Look what happened with, I'm assuming that a lot of your lifestyle and your habits and stress and worry attributed to a lot of the problems in your brain and swelling and all that. And so you had to decide, okay, all of that is gone. I'm not going to be able to cope with life the way that I used to in the past. Some people can't do that. They'll still do drugs while they're pregnant. You know what I'm getting at? Crack babies, all that kind of stuff. So how did you do that? How were you able to just say, okay, I'm done. That's it. I made that choice right now. It's over.
You're going to make me cry.
How that happened in your brain. So, no, it's fine. Cry all you want. I'll cry with you.
You got to rewind a little bit. One of the reasons that I dove so far into the drug world was because when I was 18, obviously, I had just lived this life of really bad things. And I knew like weighing 400 pounds wasn't healthy. And I knew like from the outside looking in, I probably looked like this horrible, fat, nasty person. And like society has this way of like, they might not say it to your face, but like people will look at a fat person and just think like they're fat because they want to be or they don't care or, like whatever. But so I had, back when I was 18, it was when gastric bypasses surgeries really started hitting the US. Mm-hmm. And I remember I went to a doctor and he was doing like that big group meeting. And it was where like the patients could ask questions. So like, at 18, like that was one of my my question was like, like this is where I'm at in life. One day I want to have a child. Like, what is, if you have this surgery, like, could you still have a child? And I didn't know back then. And I remember this doctor straight looked at me in this room full of people, and he was like, "How fat you are today, you will never be able to conceive a child. Smother the baby."
Jesus.
So that I can remember that meeting, that I remember the doctor, like, but that was like, whoa, what the hell am I doing? And that's when I went into drugs, because it was like, you weigh 400 pounds. You've been told that your weight, you're not going to be able to conceive a baby, and when that happened, I didn't find out I was pregnant until I was 27. So that was literally a decade of many times that I should have conceived. I believed it. And in my heart, like, I had accepted that I'm going to be this ginormous, overweight, no family person. So when I was with my daughter's dad, we found out we was 7 weeks pregnant after being together for 8 weeks. So
wow.
Right.
Okay.
So
when
I peed on that, like, honestly, when I took the pregnancy test to begin with, like, in my mind, it was like not even a possibility. It was just taking the pregnancy test to be like, yep, I'm not having my menstrual, like, whatever. And when I peed on it and it said I was pregnant, mind you, I went to like the Dollar Tree and I got a cheap one, and it said I was pregnant, and I was like, oh, hell,
no, this can't be right.
What? So went to the pharmacy and bought 3 name brand boxes, and I peed on all those, and they all was positive. So it was one of those, oh my God. Like, for me, I took that, like, I was never like this huge religious person, but I've always believed in God, if that makes sense. So it was like, in that moment, it was like,
I'm the same way.
You have a life inside of you, and you have been believing your whole life you was never going to get this. And I just, there was no way I could keep, staying on coke or meth and know that I had this baby inside of me that I was already told I would never have.
I got to tell you, Michelle, and it's making me emotional processing what you just said. I'm not kidding. I'm fighting back tears, but you just answered the question in the most beautiful fucking way possible. You didn't do a goddamn thing. Your daughter gave you your new life, period. Period. Yeah, right. Whatever the miracle of the birth and God, all that, and you're the husband or you're the father of the child, all that, any of that just taken away, all the stuff you've been through, the drugs, all the stuff from the Corvette Hot Wheels till now, your daughter, the conception of this person gave you your new life. There was no question. It was like all the reverse feeling in an instant of, I can't have kids. My life sucks. I'm going to be familyless, fat, disgusting. The world's going to look at me like this, so I give up. That completely changed when you went and bought those 3 brand names. And it really
Yeah, because I definitely did.
Absolutely incredible. So, yeah, I wouldn't have either. Hell no. So for people hearing this, right, again, you got to have your why. It isn't about being motivated or giving up on life. You have to figure out your why. For you, when that dumbass rude doctor told you you're never going to have kids, fatty, and then you realized that you could and you were, it's real, completely changed your life in an instant. I feel that's amazing. So now from here, because in essence of time, I don't care about going over the hour. We can talk for 2 hours. I don't care. We're going to go over an hour. So let's keep going though. So you're 2012, you got pregnant. You were still, big time overweight. You got sober instantly. And I can already tell it's not like you were relapsing or going back to shit. You were sober and you've been sober. And if you want to talk about this a little bit, because it was amazing, you were faced with a life or death situation while you were pregnant. And at one point you had to make a choice, potentially lose my life and the life of my child, or save myself for sure,
what happened was,
but lose my child.
As
if you want to talk
the
about,
fetus grows
go
in
ahead.
your stomach, obviously your body changes. So as Angelina was getting bigger, she the tube that runs down the neck and into the abdomen for the drainage, it got misplaced. So I started getting so sick during my pregnancy that they said, like, we need to fix this tube. Like, you're sick. Like, your brain is swelling. It's not draining the fluid. So I asked them, I said, okay, like, so if we're in surgery and heaven forbid, but I know my luck, it happens, like, what is going to happen, like, to me and my child? And they said, well, how many weeks along you are, there wouldn't be a way to, like, C-section deliver. Like, we would save you. Like, we wouldn't. She's not viable enough source that we could justify saving the baby. And that's when basically like 2/3 of my pregnancy was sick, a lot of bed rest. I had to get spinal taps through the pregnancy to relieve pressure.
Oh, God,
and so I was not okay with having the surgery to fix the brain shunt and knowing that even how minute the risk could be to the baby. Like, I couldn't go through with it. I had to wait until she came.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you did, right? You waited. And I think you said you had a few weeks after that where you were able to spend time with her, and then you had to go into the surgery. But you had some time to actually be that initial mom to a newborn, right? Yeah, it's freaking awesome. That's so great. Like, look what happened. You persevered, made your own decision, didn't want to risk her at all, and you were rewarded with that beautiful time right after. So 3 weeks passed, you had your surgery, and this is where we kind of get into the current part of your life, the career that you're in, and let's really not super dive in, but I want to hear a lot about this because it's pretty amazing. So you're having these surgeries, right?
Like, what happens is, like,
go
when
ahead.
they do a
you.
brain surgery,
go ahead.
It's obviously a brain surgery is going to be to save someone's life. Like, they don't just do that. It's not plastic surgery. You don't volunteer for it. So basically, they shave your head, like they get it all sterile and they get prep what they need to prep. But that's just it. They're doing what they got to do for you, and they don't care what you're like. If we kind of got hip after the first couple surgeries that we would just pre-shave where we knew they would be working. But that very first brain surgery, my hair was like my butt. It was so long. Oh my God. And they took all the hair and they had put it in a ponytail on the left side of my head. And then they shaved the right side of the head. So even the hair that got shaved, it was still in the ponytail with the hair still attached to the head. So then there's like iodine and obviously the blood, and you know, you got just this matted, nasty mess on top. And then on top of it, like, you just had surgery, so you can't exactly like get your head wet and wash and clean up nicely. You know, you can bird bath at a sink. So we just shaved the whole head, and it was rough.
I think I remember seeing that first picture, and it looked good. It looked pretty even. You know, you said you did it yourself and you'd never done that before. You did a pretty good job. It looked all right. So from there, that led into.
Well, I went to a regular hair salon.
Carry on.
You know, thinking we would fix it, and that was when they was like, no, we won't touch you. And so I went to a barber shop, and that was when I met a barber, and every surgery after that, like, he just helped me fix it. He helped me have a design, a style. We would try to make it as feminine as we could. We just, you know, it helped to have somebody that wasn't scared of staples and sutures or the scars. Like, it makes a difference when somebody cares.
Oh yeah. Well, because you know, you're feeling accepted. It's not the same idea of like going into high school, but that dude didn't give a shit. Where the salon, they would have been fine. They just didn't want to deal with it. You know, they want to. So that's awesome. So you're there. You're kind of learning about hairstyles because you're getting all these cool ones. I like the one you had that was like squared out on your head, like the square. That was super cool. So keep going.
During all of this, obviously,
where you're at now.
2012. It was time for her to start school. And I had been a stay-at-home mom the whole time. So when she started school, I had like days of literally the house would be clean, the meals are prepped. Like, I'm just sitting there with absolutely nothing to do because my entire life for the last 4.5 years have revolved around this little girl. And I went and got a haircut, and I'm sitting there and I'm just like, I think I'm going to go to barber school. Like, I think, you know, like how he's made me feel, I want to make other people feel that way. And I want to make other people, when you feel like you're at your worst, like, there really can be one person that can come into your life and fix it.
Yeah, and it can oftentimes be a stranger. I've talked about that recently. You might have a 30-second conversation with somebody that you pass on a bus or, you know, freaking Walmart, and they might completely change your perspective. 100% agree. And I love, because I can relate to this completely. You know, we've all got haircuts out in public and met strangers that do that, and you know, the ones that are like, just get me out of this freaking chair, please. You're just being fake. You're annoying. You're not impacting my life whatsoever, and you don't even know how to cut my hair. Or for people like you that are like, holy shit, this person really gives a shit about what's going on in my life. They're really taking the time to give me the haircut that I want, which all that kind of ties together. And it sounds like, you know, you went from struggling a bit to eventually you're an expert. You became really amazing at your craft. So yeah, talk about school a bit, you know, how you got through and I'm curious how you got approached to do that video. If that was like everybody in the class that did a testimonial,
I was definitely picked out
from your class. How'd that happen?
I didn't even know about it beforehand.
Nice.
Kind of got to school that day, and they're like, "Hey, we got a video recording team coming to make an advertisement for the school." And you know, the director, knowing, I guess, my story and things I have been through, he was just like, "You, you know, like, we need you." And it was really, honestly, to how I understood it, it was just supposed to be some like quick video, and it ended up being almost 12-minute video. So, oh yeah, like,
and you said you guys recorded for like 4 or 5 hours,
like,
right?
just recording.
That's intense.
And talking with him was so amazing. Like, that they're such a great team. But it was, school definitely was an imprint on my life. It might not have happened till, you know, 30 plus years of age, but I think that was a lot of the beauty of it, is that I haven't stopped, and, you know, I still keep making goals and striving to do what I got to do to accomplish them.
Yeah, right. And you would not have been here if at any point along the way you decided to give up, play the victim, continue doing drugs or not appreciate your daughter.
Oh,
Like you had many chances to
absolutely.
not be where you're at. And we all do. And look, there are people who have dealt with 1% of what you've dealt with and still give up. And that's a choice they make. It's not like, oh, my life's so bad. No, no, no. You make the damn choice if you're going to get up after you fall or not. And you have gotten up every single time, a stronger woman, better for it. And now, and we're not going to talk about maybe another episode, and we'll talk about it in the future. But recently, you've been through some serious shit, and all I'll say about this, really simply, and everybody can relate. But if you don't understand this, you should figure it out right now. Living an excellent life, being happy, finding fulfillment is not something that you achieve and you're done. It's every single day, every second of your life. You maintain that and not take things that happen to
Yes.
you negatively as setbacks, right? Don't see them like that. They might be steps backwards, but you don't have to stop going down your path. And you're the embodiment of that more than damn near anybody I've met in recent history. You had so many opportunities to just let go, and you did not. And that led, now you're a successful barber. You're doing, making money in a career that you love. You've recently started
Yes.
a nonprofit. Is that right? Talk about that, because I'm fascinated. I read the mission statement. I love it. I'm all about it. It kind of ties a little bit into what I'm doing with my mission and this podcast and the things I'm working on. But yeah, go ahead and talk about that. How did that idea come from? Where did you get the name,
Basically,
and what's
we're
the
called
goal?
Don't Raise Statistics. We are definitely very, very new in endeavor. But
Yeah, yeah.
ultimately, what it came from was basically all my life, every statistic possible has been stacked against me. It's been, like you should have died, or, this, or, you're 420 pounds, like you're going to have diabetes. You're like every statistic that could possibly be against a person. I have basically had to try to reverse the odds. Then, just through life, there's things like I got to drive an hour and 15 minutes to school, got to go be there for 10 hours, got to drive an hour and 15 minutes home. Do I put this money in gas, or do I go buy some groceries? Being a single parent, it puts you in a situation like where things aren't statistically good. Just a single parent alone, the statistics against yourself and your child are astronomically unfair. To be told you make too much money for food stamps, but you know that you just paid the rent and the bills and you got to go to school because that's what's going to make your life better for your child. Like, I wanted to create something that was the middle ground for the people that make too much money for food stamps, but they know that if they don't pay this bill, that utility might get shut off. Like it's almost like there's not enough help for a certain level, and then there's too much help for another level.
Oh, I totally agree. I really don't even want to go into this too much, but there are times when I see, these overfilled grocery carts that have, $300-$400 worth of food. And again, I don't want to, I'm just, for the audience and you kind of figure out what I'm talking about. Then they go out to their Escalade,
or the food stamp card was
or
put
their,
out to pay for
$80,000 vehicle. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. It's a big time problem, and you're an example of not, because they didn't even give you the chance to to be a welfare person. You didn't have a chance, so you had to make it work. And excuse me, I want to comment one thing about what you're doing, and kind of a broader scale too. People, they look at statistics. If you were to take the things that happened in your life and hedged your bets on whether you were going to become a successful person in life, if you were just like purely not feelings, just looking at like numbers, right? There, at any point along the way, if someone were to hedge their bets, and think of it like this way too, if you own a company and you're looking at a resume, one person's a felon, got a whole bunch of problems, did some drugs, blah, 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 those are statistically not going to be a good employee. They could be, though. They could be the best employee you've ever had. So people look at those numbers and they dictate that's who that person is. I totally agree. And even more practically, what you're talking about with money, they look at your income, right? Your quote unquote income and how much you're making. And you're not allowed to get a little bit of extra help when someone who is not working as hard as you is using the system for their own advantage. And I want to hold my tongue and say any more with that, but you know what I'm getting at, and it's kind of a travesty. So if there was some kind of middle ground where you were able to apply through a nonprofit, and I'm already kind of running my gears. Maybe we'll talk offline about this, and I could help support and be a part of it. But you buy into the program, you get the help that you need, get on your feet, and then you're also there in the future to like help people out. And think of it like an emergency fund. A lot of companies have those where, if a major disaster happens in your life, you can request some help from your company. So if there was something more like a nonprofit for everybody in the country, not just for an individual company, I think that'd be awesome. It could really help a lot of lives. And there would be a lot of philanthropists and people that want to get involved that realize this is a problem.
Envision this brilliant, amazing community center, and in my mind, it's mapped out, like, different sections and rooms and formats and everything. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like, I can literally see Don't Raise statistics being worldwide. Like, literally, like, my goal is to basically ultimately go into all of the lowest income communities and the most stricken with the worst statistics, and I want to fix them.
Yes. And it's so funny you're saying like that. I guess to cap off my point, you get people that look at those stats and they make a decision based on how they should go forward instead of thinking, what can I do to help and help this statistic and help that group or that community, right? It's super powerful. That's great. And I guess kind of your end game, schooling wise and what you want to do long term, kind of coupled with the nonprofit is you want to get into family law. And become a lawyer, right? Yeah. Talk about that for a little bit. Where'd that motivation come from?
We started.
I think I have an idea, but go ahead.
And lawyers. Some of the things we was needing to do to get Don't Raise statistics going, and when you map out those financial costs over the years, it's almost better to earn those degrees yourself and not pay those fees. Ultimately, I want to get the bachelor's in accounting, and I want to get a law degree with the family law and nonprofit law, more so to work with Don't Raise statistics and the people that can't afford the lawyers and the accountants to help them financially plan their lives or whatever. I can't even begin to tell you how much we've had to spend on lawyers for family law just for me to go through what I've had to do for my daughter. So to be able to try to make these opportunities available to the people that generally could never afford them, to even have good representation, like the goal is to just use that platform to help make people's lives better. So I do want to, my goal is to become a lawyer and get my law degree the same year that my daughter graduates high school. So we both walk across the stage in the same year. And then I've given myself 10 years to do this, which it can be done in about 7 or 8. And right now it's trying to plan it financially because like I am the single parent. And so I got to plan, student loan, or like I'm about to pay for some degrees that there's no intention of using them to make myself money. If that. Yeah,
it does. You know what I'm thinking your organization kind of reminds me of? It's like St. Jude's, right, for children, and that organization helps kids get better physically, where your organization is more of a financial
showing
and
them
emotional
you can have a broken home,
right?
But you don't have to be what the statistics are.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Because you get that when this is a big proponent of my life, and it's a little bit more woo-woo how I kind of describe it. But when you label yourself, I'm a procrastinator, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a low-income statistic and never going to be anything else. When you do that, it can be really tough to get out. So to have an environment, an organization, even a couple people to talk to that can get you out of that mindset when you're young, so important. It's awesome. Just such a great goal, and I'm going to do everything in my power to help you get that out there and grow this through this podcast and anything else I do. And people are going to hear this, and now we're talking about this because we kind of hit our hour mark. And I do want to talk a little bit more, but if you want to talk for a minute about, and I'm going to put all of this on the show notes and a link to your video so people can get to know a little more about you and anywhere they can find you. Where can people go to either support the Don't Raise Statistics or connect with you or whatever? What's the best way to find you?
Obviously, it's how we have Michelle Ramos, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's all Barber Beauty 413, at Barber Beauty 413, Michelle Ramos. It's all there. We got the Don't Raise Statistics. It's not, like I said, I just began this endeavor. So like, I'm in 5 different books now about building the business plans and accounting and,
nice.
We're in the building phase. I've been tossing around the idea of setting up a GoFundMe for Don't Raise Statistics, in the sense of like one that doesn't necessarily have an end date, but maybe like there are people that have asked, well, like, we can help financially, but can we do this? I've been approached to say, once I get a solid business plan put together, come to them. They're financial investors that love the idea and they would love to see the community center built. And that's kind of where going to school for accounting and nonprofit law and family law came into play, because I can't really afford to pay the people to help me build the business plans. So I get on Amazon and I buy business plan books, law books, and I go to the library and I just indulge in as much free knowledge as I can, until I can afford the schooling to really learn what to do.
Michelle, I got to tell you, I'm not trying to make you feel good, kiss your ass, pull smoke up your butt, anything like that. You're a really incredible person. The fact that no, I really mean that. And I'm not, again, I don't care if I never talk to you again. It's so true. And I do care about that, but you're such an amazing person. To hear you talk about your current state, even with all the stuff I know about that you've been through recently, but talk about your current state, where you want to go in the future. And I'm already like buying into it. Like it's already going to happen because of your confidence in the way you're describing that. There are so many people. Oh, I know. I can see myself walking into the thing right now being like, holy shit, it's amazing. But the fact that you have such an unwavering confidence, I hesitate to say positivity, but it is this positivity to push yourself forward, and you're not even considering anything that's happened in your past. None of it, right? The weight of that is what keeps most people from even finding some semblance of happiness in their life. So anybody that's hearing this, I really hope, if you're in that mindset of, damn, everything sucks, think about what Michelle has been through. Is your life really that bad? Like the card that she's been dealt, that she did not have anything to do with getting those cards. It was what was dealt to her, and she still went through it. There are people who make their own mistakes, and it's completely under their control, and they still give up, right? You could have done that. You could have played the victim, and I commend you so much for what you're doing. You're such an incredible mom, just on base of what you've told me, and even when you had her, you talk about all my entire existence for years as my daughter, those first 4 years. Like, a lot of people don't do that. So I commend you for what you've done. I appreciate the conversation. I will have you back. And I've told all my guests, maybe 3 to 6 months. Go ahead.
You do say, like, I keep pushing and everything. And, like, people need to believe, like, you really can keep pushing. But I don't want people to think, like, there were days I would lay in bed. And this is even after having my daughter. I would wake up pissed off. I woke up. Like, when you have a new baby and you weigh 420 pounds and you need a hip replacement, and then it's like I had to wake up and fight for the life that I feel my daughter deserves. And like, people talk about generational curses and, like how you said, the cards you're dealt. Like, I could be dealt this hand and I accept what I was dealt, but just because you accept it doesn't mean that it's what you got to go with. Right.
Yeah. Or that it's going to be easy. right? It's still going to be fucking difficult to get through, but
Right.
like you said, you make that decision every morning, even though it sucks, even though you might not want to do it. I'm glad you said this, because I didn't want to paint that as this perfect picture of perseverance leads to ending fulfillment. No, you're still working at it day to day, even as we speak right now. So I guess that's the takeaway from this. Yeah, you don't, guys, if you think you're on some quest and there's going to be some end and you're done and you can sit back and relax, you're living in fantasy land. This is a commitment you make, and you got to persevere through it every single day. And if you keep doing that, you could end up where Michelle is, where it's been through a ton of amazing and also crazy shit and is still able to push forward. So it's just incredible. I've had such a great time talking to you. We'll talk offline. Yeah, it's been incredible. And I'd like to have you back. And usually it's going to be 3 to 6 months for other guests, but I have a feeling it might be a little bit quicker for you. Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much again. I appreciate your time, and we'll talk soon. I'll make sure to get all your links and so people can connect with you. And yeah, please, guys, ladies and gentlemen, go connect with Michelle, see if you can help her nonprofit, because it's going to change the world. And, I'm happy to at least be a part of it, at least in a little bit right now. So thank you for being here, Michelle. Yeah.